Okay, well, welcome back to the Modern Revolution. I'm so glad you decided to come back and listen to us again. As you know, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the background of our guests and what they've done and try to give authority to their conversation before you listen. Instead, here we really want you just to listen and to see what resonates with you with our guests. And then at the end, we will tell you how to learn more about them, uh, and that will give you a chance to make decisions about their ideas and their comments on their own merits. And then at the end, if you want to learn more about it, we will tell you how to do that. So today, I'm very lucky to have Madam Bella with us. And Madam Bella, thank you for agreeing to spend some time with us.
Thank you for even inviting me. It's perfect. I love it.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, Madam Bella, we like to ask our guests what problem in the world they're working on. So may I ask you, what problem in the world are you working on?
My focus is legalizing the model from Nevada, even though it's rather archaic, that legalizes rural houses of what we call prostitution.
Okay.
All right. And that has been, an ongoing, um, I'm going to say, calling of mine. And
Okay.
and the reason being is I've been able to see how well it works in rural Nevada,
Okay.
and then I also realized that there's so many people that are in the industry that would like decriminalization,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm wanting them to understand there is no such thing as decriminalization without legalization and expecting safety to go along with their decriminalization.
Okay.
So, I know it's a very, 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 uh, di- I'm going to call it multifaceted situation. And as, the owner, madam of Bella's Hacienda Ranch, I can only barely talk about the spark of legalization in a few rural counties in Nevada, but it's worth looking into. It's worth having it help with uh, the possibility of solving things like trafficking, helping to keep that from happening, helping for people to understand how to be human correctly.
So let's invert that for 1 second and let me put the question to you. What types of problems does society experience with the criminalization of prostitution? Because I think on balance, and I don't know the history of that, and perhaps that's not even the right word, but the criminalizing of this business, what types of negative things come out of it? And then we can talk a little bit about when in this rural model that there have been positive things. But what are perhaps the unseen costs that people wouldn't think about by the model that we've in most areas of the country for most of the history I can think of
Mhm.
experience. So what because I think many people might say, well, this is this comes with problems if we don't have this as a criminal act. There are things that happen that we don't want to happen. But I think what you're trying to tell us is that there are unseen consequences to the criminalization of this whatever the right term you want to use, business, this
Industry. It is an
industry.
industry,
Yes.
you know, and that's a very good question because what it what criminalization really does is make criminals out of individuals that want to exchange intimate relationships for money.
Hmm.
And I never believed that we should make a person a criminal over something that we come here on this planet to just do. But can we learn to do it safely? We are in a time in history where there are regulations, there's taxes, there's things, there's a reason to have police protection.
Right.
But decriminalization does not solve, protection.
Right.
All it does, because it won't. Why would they? Why would they all of a sudden protect people just because it's anybody can do anything they want at any time?
Right.
Um, I've watched the Nordic law, and in some instances, even in Nevada, the Nordic law is present. It just is, if a client is outside of a brothel, then it's as if the Nordic law goes straight into effect. As long as you're in a brothel, golden.
Well, tell us
Public,
what that is. Not everybody will be
oh, the
familiar
Nordic,
with that term. Yes, tell us what the Nordic law is.
the Nordic law makes a criminal out of the buyer.
Okay.
The seller walks away without any charges.
Hmm.
But how many families will that ruin? Does that really solve the issue of how to uh, how to take a percentage of what we call an industry and have it be safe for all involved? And guess what? The people that govern
Right.
have one question.
Right.
Okay, why should we do this? How is this going to help us financially?
Right.
Second question is public safety. It's
Right.
always in that order.
Okay. So the first thing you said in terms of like the consequences, right, is that it makes criminals out of people who are in this industry. And one question that I think I'd like for you to address, because in preparation for this conversation, as I was talking to people about it, one of the things that people react very emotionally to this topic. And I think many of the people that I talked to were saying, look, this industry is an industry of last resort. It's not an industry that anybody goes into mindfully that, hey, I want to do this as my livelihood. Instead, they're there because of manipulation or hurtfulness, or, there's a negative reason that they've chosen it. So if we take criminalization off the table as like, okay, there's legal consequences, um, could you just give a little description of the relationship that the workers in this industry have to it? Because I'm not sure that everybody has a sense of, hey, this is somebody chose to do this.
Peter, when we're looking at ladies that,
Hmm.
let's say, it's submit an application to me. Now,
Yes.
they could do it to any other house, right?
Okay.
Any other brothel.
Right.
But when they submit an application, there
Right.
is some conversation that
Right.
goes along with that helps me understand why this is a calling for them. It's a
Okay.
short calling. They don't do this for very long.
Right.
But what is it that is
Yes.
motivating them to
Okay.
be a courtesan at Bella's Hacienda Ranch, right?
Okay.
Um, and I want your uh, your subscribers to understand that there is a big group of regulations. No, cancel that. There's regulations that go along with their application. All
Right.
right. There's fingerprinting. So they
Sure.
can't just be off the street
Right.
and
Right.
have any kind of criminal background.
Right. Right.
There's medical checks on a weekly basis. They
Sure.
have to have valid IDs and social security cards. They
Right.
they have to be absolutely an upstanding woman
Right.
in this industry. And they aren't in their teens.
Right.
They're 21 and above.
Sure.
Some of them are 21. They're I have many in their 20s, 30s, and a few that are absolutely drop dead gorgeous move into their 40s.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, I'm never going to say that they've worked for me from 21 to 40 something.
Right. Right.
They may have come into this industry in their late 30s.
Hmm.
But the idea is people get to think about getting the emotion out of it.
Right.
You
Right.
aren't standing in their shoes. Is this harming you?
Right.
Why can't people do something that's
Yes.
harm to none by choice?
Right.
without somebody else thinking that they're saving them or they need saving,
Yes. Right.
or you don't understand, this is dirty. Oh no, these, if a person went to my website, and it's, by the way, bellas.us, they're going to see beautiful, upstanding, gorgeous courtesans with bios, and there's a reason. They explain their reason. They explain why they're in service, how they're in service.
Okay.
So this small model of houses of prostitution, and that's a
Right.
pretty harsh word, but
Right.
it's the label it got in 1970. This particular industry has had a track record of only positivity for over 50 years.
So I think when I listened to that, we talked a little bit about like the negative consequences, and negative consequences being the criminalization of this industry, and the what I'm also hearing then is like in the absence of the criminalization, you now have a structure that now creates a conversation between the worker in the industry and the employer in the industry. And that conversation um, allows for the consumer of the end product, for whatever the right term is, right, to have a sense of like, hey, I'm coming into a situation where everybody involved has a safer dynamic, that they can be assured this is not a question of trafficking, right, which is a
Correct?
big problem in the world, and that this structure, this legalized structure, sort of create safety among everybody involved that doesn't exist in a criminalized structure. I mean, is that a fair kind of paraphrase of what you said?
Yes. And, I mean, look at Las Vegas. Las Vegas has no legal brothels.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And they did that by choice when
Mm-hmm.
counties were allowed to vote on if they wanted them, us or not.
Right.
That's the largest human trafficking city in the country.
Interesting. Yeah.
You don't think they couldn't use a district, that it wouldn't have an effect on what's going on underground? Of
Right.
course it would. But see, there's other powerful entities at hand that want to have control of certain things. And all I'm saying is, many of the individuals coming from their emotion are that is what's happening out there.
Right.
But if in certain areas that, let's call it, can't happen,
Mm-hmm.
or can't happen easily, then there's part of a solution. This whole, like I said, it's a huge um, global situation. And I've talked to people all over the globe that say, look, in our country, we've got the Nordic, we've got none of this. You have to pay the police off, or there's clubs, and in the clubs you don't use condoms, and they bring in their own doctors, and so I mean this is global,
Okay.
and those things in it could bring out an emotion in me. But rather than buy into that and point a finger, I'm standing in the shoes of a woman saying, "Well, I know what works. I know how it works. I know how it helps a community, and it isn't something to force on anyone. It's just proven."
So in terms of what you just said, so in other places in the world where this is not criminalized, is there a meaningful difference in the amount of trafficking of women and boys, women and men illegally? Is there is the safety that's described in the context of your place? Because one of the questions might be, is it the force of Madame Bella's personality and ethics and whatnot that create this safety, or is what the structure you're suggesting that may exist in other places, does that safety get conveyed via the structure? In places that don't criminalize this industry, are those places safer, or is it worse? Is the trafficking and the all the negative things we could talk about present in those communities?
All right, this criminalization thing, say when I was talking about these other countries,
Right.
if you're paying off the police and you're not getting arrested, it's still criminalized.
I agree. Yes.
Okay.
That's, yeah, right. That's a
So,
criminal
so,
situation.
all right. So the idea is, let's say that's, you know, most of our country. And then
Hmm.
I know talking with many individuals that are in an industry in their country
Hmm.
that there's all of this manipulation of women
Right.
in involved. But in order for them to make their money and take it home or feed their families or whatever it is, that 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 that's what the people that are getting emotional could point their emotion at, because that doesn't have a solution. That could be and fit into their idea of what they think is just everywhere, except for the Nevada rural brothels.
So that's, I guess, one of the questions I like to ask in general on this is that, like, what assumptions are you challenging? Like when you're suggesting that the Nevada rural model belongs other places than rural Nevada, what assumptions are, what are the big, there's a lot I think present in this question, but I mean, what's the largest assumptions that you're challenging to people? For example, if Las Vegas City had adopted the same rules of was it the power, is there power in place that wanted to keep that status quo the way it is in the city of Las Vegas, or is it a set of perceived moral advantages to having it remain criminalized? Like when you talk about expanding this model beyond where it is, what are you up against in terms of people's assumptions that you're challenging?
Um, Assumptions. Yeah, what a great word. And it's something we're never supposed to do or
Right,
take
right.
anything personally, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but the assumption seems to be that anyone who engages in sensual sexual services for money has uh, somehow been put in that such
Yeah.
situation from being destitute in some way.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And that is false.
Okay.
Okay. They have to travel here. They have to get a point. I mean, they have to have money to get here. They
Right.
aren't showing up by Greyhound bus
Right, right.
with everything in plastic bags. They have to, obviously, and the ladies that choose to work with me, they come from all over the country. They
Hmm.
come from Asia, they come from Russia, they come from,
Yeah,
and this is the states too, whether it's
right,
California or New York State or Florida or anywhere.
right,
And so why would they travel all that way if this wasn't their choice?
right.
All right. And one other thing, because I might be older than a few of your listeners, but there's a few of us that were really good at one night stands and giving it away for nothing. The dinner and the movie, but we just didn't know, right? It was like our hormones are raging and all these things, and these younger women, I always like to say they're cut from different cloth.
Hmm.
They when I first came on board as Madame Bella, it was legal to have sex without a condom. There was no disease. I was pre-HIV, pre social media, computer era.
Right.
Condoms were horrible. Lube was horrible. So, I mean, I've watched 37 years of our transition as what should have been humanity,
Hmm.
and I think we have an F minus. We're as judgmental as ever.
Right.
we think we should be the boss of everybody.
Yeah, right, right,
And it's like, we aren't the boss of anybody. We better figure out how to be the boss of ourselves. If
right,
we don't want to partake in this, and
right.
there's a blueprint that makes it safe for others, who are we to say, oh, that's wrong?
Well, so we talked a little bit like this, your involvement with this industry goes back some time. And so it's not a career path that many have trodden, right? So I'm
Right?
curious, is this something that you incrementally came to, or did you have an epiphany? Like you're like, this is what I'm going to do. So as you kind of came to this road, how did it happen? Did it happen in an instant, and you're like, this is my road, or were there many many steps along the way in which you kind of arrived in this role, over
Um,
time?
well, of course, there were many, many steps, but rather than sort of log all of those,
No,
I
right,
did
right.
have an epiphany.
Okay,
All
that's what
right.
I'm interested
But my epiphany was after I'd done the things like learn the book work and how it ran, percentages, what it was about, you know, uh, why the industry was important to a community.
in. Right.
Okay.
That's
Even
interesting.
even though it's a very rural community.
Right.
But what I what I kept looking at in the very beginning, because there were things like pimps back then,
Sure.
and they're still out there.
I
If you're
imagine.
in the world of criminalization in states that have no legalization,
Hmm.
right? It's alive and well.
Okay.
And so I saw, of course, some of the women that did come in here and work at what was the hacienda at that time. It
Hmm.
was just always they were handing their money over, and I said, my epiphany was, well, this isn't a good idea. You can't be in this industry for very long. Why are you giving it to him?
Hmm.
And so I probably put myself out of business almost 6 or 7 times
Right.
before I realized I was ahead of my time.
Okay.
And now, guess what? And it evolved, of course, but I could just go from, you know, 37 years ago till now and say, now these ladies, they're okay with being whatever the gentleman is looking for, right?
Hmm.
And it's, believe it when I say, there's probably less sex than people could even imagine.
That's interesting.
Okay. So but these women
Hmm.
feel very strongly about being in service in the industry, and they wouldn't couldn't even imagine sex without a condom.
Hmm.
It just, what? If I said there were no condoms. So, that's an important thing to see, that safety of each individual woman is something that they just are. They
So
just do.
yeah, it sounds like the epiphany in the beginning, at least. I mean, understand that this is a subtle and complicated like road, but it sounds like the first epiphany was economic in nature. Like there was an economic lack of power for the women, that they were in this industry, but they gave up the economic power to their employers, so to speak. And
Hmm.
that was it was an epiphany for you. Like, well, this is a problem, and it's a solvable problem, although it sounds like your journey as a businesswoman, that it was complicated. If you almost went out of business 6 times or whatever you said, like, then it's not been a straight line, clearly. But at the end of it, now you have an economic model that works for you, that works for the people that work within the context of Bella's. um, when somebody listens to this, and these ideas and this industry may be really absent from their thinking, Um, what might you tell them that, look, this is actually a more important and serious issue than you think it is? What might you say to somebody who's listening with those ears, going, you know what? Other than like what I see on TV and what I, have heard about in my life, like I don't have any, they may not have any real connection to this industry. Um, why might they take an interest in what you're saying, to be like, no, this is actually something that needs to be addressed. It's important.
The stigma associated with labeling
Hmm.
something
Yeah.
that a person has never encountered, I believe should bring about a curiosity.
Hmm.
Like, well, visit a brothel, take a complimentary tour. By visiting a brothel, every brothel says the same type of thing.
Okay.
There's no obligation.
Right.
Take the tour, get your questions answered.
Right.
And that's why there are so many I'm going to say podcasters or individuals that come in and they just say, I'm just curious, how does this work? I want to see. And there many times they just think people are going to be running around half naked and it's a wild party, and
Right.
it's the direct opposite.
Hmm.
They, in the middle of summer, these gals could be running around in a robe that looks like they should be in the Arctic. It's
Right.
like
Right.
they're just covered up to here. They're they love to answer questions. They love to talk about our sensuality, our sexuality. And think about all the people. And this is part of what I call the guests.
Hmm.
There are many people that get to have the love in their life, right? That person,
Right.
that's a small percentage.
Hmm.
Okay. Otherwise, people are at times in career that they don't have time
Hmm.
for a relationship. They aren't choosing a relationship right
Right.
now,
Right.
but they have those requirements.
Hmm.
And so, very simply, it's totally harm to none to come in, choose an individual, a lady who's any nationality that,
Hmm.
that they could ever maybe want to have an experience with,
Right.
and and they talk about it. They decide, are they an energetic fit? Can they go behind the closed door, and whatever that experience is something that they'll both remember,
Right.
especially the client
Sure.
he didn't have to manipulate another for maybe an intimate moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting to me. I mean, because as you're talking, I'm thinking about the person who feels in emotional protectiveness of like, hey, there, I know that the world has trafficking of people, and that all these awful things are happening. And then on the other side of it, of this conversation, is what sounds to be a very safe and maybe tender, gentle experience of people choosing to have an encounter. And
Mhm.
that the notion of like, well, if you want to protect the person, if you want to take sort of a bite out of the trafficking world to reduce it, to make it less present in the world, then having this model that you're working under actually helps those people. And that, I'm not sure that everybody would draw that connection, because it seems to me that you're suggesting that, right? That this model has a positive effect on all of these negative things out there in the world. I mean, am I drawing that conclusion because I want to draw that conclusion, or is that part of what you're saying today?
I am saying that your conclusion is correct. I would never be able to say, oh, 100%, we stop trafficking
Right,
in
right, right.
rural
Yes.
Nevada. But it would be so difficult at this time in history, with the way the regulations are and the
Yeah.
fingerprinting and everything being checked. It would be virtually impossible for
Right.
someone to come into a brothel against their will.
Right. So Madam Bella, is it fair to say this then? So in an environment where the consumer is looking for this experience, given the choice between a very safe situation and then a situation that um, would be, I mean, a trafficked encounter sounds like it's something that is fraught with the opportunity to carry, you know, danger, legal
Mhm.
danger, physical danger, danger to your health, that they would pick the regulated experience more often than not, which would, okay, yes, the legalization may not be the elimination of human trafficking, but it would be a reduction. I mean, is that kind of what we're talking about here? Because that, if you're somebody listening and you're like, this has nothing to do with my world, but you care about human trafficking, you'd like to see it reduced, what you're giving a roadmap towards the reduction of this awful situation on the planet. Is that, I mean, am I following
Yeah,
correctly?
it does. It does. It's a very small, I'm going to say percentile, when you
Hmm.
look at 19 brothels in rural counties,
Right.
okay, versus this entire globe.
Yes, right.
Okay, so I mean it's tiny,
Yes, right.
but if that has what I call any type of positive, proven, uh, oh, what would be the word? It's like a proven statistic
Right.
that okay, we're only it's so little, but it works.
Right. Right. Yes, interesting.
But,
Yeah.
but so my point is, we could say trafficking is rampant and out of control
Hmm.
across a globe.
Right. Right.
All right. We could say that it isn't very much different from like being enslaved.
Yes, I think
All right.
modern day slavery is often, a
This,
term that gets described to human trafficking, right?
okay. And so, in looking at that, how do what's that little joke? How do you eat an elephant?
Right. Right. Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Right.
So, if there's one little statistic that has proven itself,
Right.
then why would someone go out and reinvent the wheel
Right. Right.
when you could say the big cities, they might be out of control forever. All right.
Hmm.
But what about the other areas that it would work in?
Right.
Because we know that if we went way back into the 70s
Hmm.
in Vegas, who ran Vegas?
Right. Right.
Who,
Yeah.
come
Right.
on, we know who ran Vegas.
Sure. Sure.
And so that could have been horse racing, gambling, um, drugs,
Right.
uh, and sexual
Sure.
favor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was all this big power, mobbish looking
Right.
entity. It was big, and they wanted to keep it that way. So obviously, it's still that way. And so rather than calling it anything else, they just call it human trafficking.
Right. Right.
All right, but it's still all there. And if you look at Nevada, we were like the Wild West.
Hmm.
What did we offer this country? Well, we offered gambling,
Right.
quickie divorces, quickie
Yeah.
marriages,
Right. Yeah.
prostitution, and
Yeah.
what do we
Right.
have left?
Right.
We have the gambling's gone. It's like everywhere.
Right.
Anybody can get a quickie or a marriage anywhere.
Right. Right.
The pot things everywhere.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Right.
cannabis
Right.
everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What do we have left?
Right.
One,
Right.
and it's like we have
Yes, right,
one
right.
thing.
Other, right, right. Although yeah, I think there's probably reason to go to Nevada besides that, but let me as we kind of come to uh, the conclusion here, I want to ask you when as you think about your accomplishments. Now, you've been in this industry for a long time, and I don't have any sense of like if you have peers, like if there's a group of women in which, or if you're like a revolutionary onto your own, and like you're the only one. But when you would want to have somebody think of your accomplishment, like if you were to distill things down, like what do you want to be tied to as an accomplishment? It sounds like, we've talked a lot about sort of people's dignity and safety and, creating some equality from an economic perspective. How might you describe um, your accomplishment as a professional in this industry over this long career? How would you want people to talk about it?
Well, I chuckle because, there's a part of me that's, uh, absolutely passionate about us figuring this out.
Right, right.
And as people, right? And if and so for me, I feel like kind of a sassy woman filled with this wisdom
Right,
that's so common sense.
right.
You
Yeah,
know, it that it to just say I'm a pioneer.
right, right.
I'm like the 21st century Veronica Franco, you
Well,
know?
that won't be familiar to everybody. Who's the
Okay,
Verona?
well, Veronica Franco is where the term courtesan came from.
Okay,
And that was in Venice, all
okay,
right, where in the 1500s,
right,
um, women never had access to any type of education. And it
okay,
didn't matter if they were nobility or whatever it was.
okay.
But then the nobility, that was the ruling class, were
Hmm.
watching all of these various levels of sexual providers
Okay,
from the wharf or the canals up to the king, the aristocrats, the clergy. And so by the time you get to Veronica Franco, she
okay.
is like the Cortegiana Onesta. You don't get any higher. She could go to war. She had access to all the libraries. She could do anything she wanted. She wrote poetry. She defended herself in court when, they kind of came after her as the witch thing. But in the 1500s, what they did as the aristocratic community in
Right,
Venice was they created public safety
right.
among these women.
Okay,
All right. And it worked.
okay,
All right. So she did that in the 1500s.
okay.
Here I
Yes,
am, third decade, 21st century. How do
right.
you think we're doing? Not so good, Peter.
Yeah,
We
right,
look
right.
like we forgot everything Lao Tzu ever talked about,
So
harm to none
right, right.
type of thing. And so, I mean, I have a great sense of humor as well about it. But I want people to to investigate.
Yeah.
Go,
Yeah, yeah, right. I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, what you don't understand, if you haven't investigated it and remains something that you've labeled without proper investigation, then you just made a decision. You don't really have you're not making that decision based on, any experience. You're making it based on whatever principle you think is, the case, without having gone through the trouble to like go and explore, hey, what is this really like? Because without that, then especially if there are consequences to other people, then you're hurting someone without necessarily understanding how you're being hurt or how you're being hurtful, I think is kind of what you're saying.
correct. And
Yeah.
you know what? I don't believe that a guest or a courtesan needs to go out into the world and shout it to the
Right,
world
right. Yeah.
because it's private. What we do with our sensuality, our sexuality is private. It doesn't belong on Facebook.
Right. Yes. Yes. It is not social media appropriate. Yes, it is.
No. And so let's be classy. Let's be
Sure.
classy about this this short amount of time we have on this globe.
Yeah, right.
And
Right.
I'm doing it with style and with
Right.
class. And I'm talking about it like it really is. It's
Yeah.
being having the ability to have these intimate relationships
Right.
is a gift.
Sure.
And so let's do it and use it correctly.
Yes. All right. Well, Madam Bella, look, thank you for coming and talking with me. I will admit to you that prior to us connecting, this isn't a topic that would have naturally come to me. It's not something that I was thinking about until we got connected. And I'm grateful that you were willing to come and have a conversation with somebody with that who doesn't have like a very a depth of knowledge of the subject, and allow me to be curious with you without being knowledgeable, and just to ask questions as our conversation has come up. And I hope that it encourages other people to, create a level of curiosity about, what to do, how to create circumstances that are best for everybody in all aspects of their life. And this is an industry, not to use a cliche, but it's been with us for some time, right? I mean,
Yes, it is.
it
Yes.
has been known as the oldest business in the history of business. And so as such, I think to poke our head in the sand to say that, it has no place in the world, as opposed to saying it does have a place, and that place should be safe, private, and and equitable, is a better choice rather than to just kind of condemn it to a lawlessness and a dangerousness for both the consumer and the provider. So I'm grateful that you came and spoke with me today.
Thank you. There's no reason to tarnish the beauty of being human.
Ah, well said. Well said. All right. Well, today's modern revolutionary, Madam Bella, she was brave enough to come and bring her, words to you, her ideas to you, and to have you listen to them. And I hope that you're inspired to be curious and learn more about it. And I'm hoping that it is something that inspires you to come and bring your ideas to the world as well, because the modern revolution needs us all.